Welcome to the Deep Dive. We dig into important sources to give you, well, kind of a shortcut to really understanding complex topics. Today we're jumping into the pretty intense world of FBI negotiation. And honestly, what we found is going to challenge how you think about persuasion. You've really looked into Chris Voss's work, starting with this almost unbelievable scenario at Harvard Law School. I mean, picture this. Chris Voss, FBI lead international kidnapping negotiator, tons of experience in life or death stuff. And he's intimidated, not by some terrorist, no, but by a role play. His own son is kidnapped, and the kidnappers, Harvard professors wanting $1 million. What was that all about?
Oh, it's a fantastic starting point, truly. Our deep dive today is into Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. And our mission really is to unpack how these FBI tactics, which are often really counterintuitive, psychology-based, how these things forged in actual crises can help you. You know, and everything from salary talks to just like family disagreements. It's about getting past just logic, connecting properly. It's a shortcut, really, to mastering human interaction, not just negotiation.
And that Harvard thing, it was such a clash of worlds, wasn't it? You had Voss, former street cop, FBI agent, learned everything hands-on, like in the field. And he's up against these academic heavyweights. Robert Nukin wrote Bargaining with the Devil, Gabrielle Bloom, Israeli National Security Council.
Right.
Their whole approach was intellectual, right? Game theory, logic, BATNA.
Yep. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Yeah.
Your plan B, essentially.
And ZooPA, the zone of possible agreement, that common ground. All very getting to, yes, very traditional textbook stuff.
Exactly. They expected him to play our game. But what's so interesting here, this wasn't just brain versus brain. It was like two different universes colliding. One academic, theoretical. The other just raw, practical, where lives were on the line. And Voss's breakthrough, these calibrated questions, he just kept asking things like, how am I supposed to pay you? And how am I supposed to know my son is okay? They weren't attacks. They were open-ended. Made the professors feel in charge, but they were actually wrestling with Voss's problems.
Okay, so it wasn't about winning the argument.
No, it totally disarmed them. And it showed this huge gap in their purely rational models. Like our standard negotiation playbook was missing something really fundamental, something human.
That's fascinating. He made them solve his issue. And you know, that missing piece, it became painfully clear in real life, didn't it? With some tragic negotiation failures back in the day. The 70s airline hijackings, George Gift Jr. murdering hostages, or later Ruby Ridge, Waco. Getting to yes just didn't cut it. Like Voss said, you can't reason logically with a guy who thinks he's the Messiah.
Exactly right. It showed that these high-stakes situations, they're rarely just rational problem-solving exercises.
So something had to change.
Right. And a huge influence here was the work of behavioral economists.
Yeah.
You know, Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, they basically proved humans aren't these purely rational beings. We're driven by what Kahneman called our irrational beasts.
Well, our emotions, our biases.
Yeah, over 150 cognitive biases they identified. Things like the framing effect, how just changing the way you present info changes how we see it. Prospect theory, how we weigh risks and rewards. And loss aversion, we hate losing something way more than we like gaining something similar.
Right. Losing $20 feels worse than finding $20 feels good.
Precisely. It showed our decisions are often emotional. Kahneman's famous line, feeling is a form of thinking. So the FBI adapted. They shifted from, as Voss put it, math and economics towards real empathy. They brought in counseling skills, active listening. They developed what they call tactical empathy.
Tactical empathy. Sounds intense.
It is, in a way. Voss calls it listening as a martial art, balancing emotional smarts with being assertive. It wasn't about being nice. It was about understanding and influencing people acting irrationally.
Okay, so what's the takeaway for us then, it sounds like? Well,
Sure.
your best logical points, your perfect spreadsheet might be totally useless.
Pretty much, yeah. If you're not talking to the, let's say, the emotional animal on the other side of the table.
It's about people smarts, not just brain power.
Exactly. Applied people smarts.
So if emotional intelligence is so critical, how do these agents actually use it? What's the first step? You mentioned active listening and using your voice.
It absolutely starts there.
Yeah.
Voss talks about his first really high-pressure case,
Yeah.
a bank robbery in Brooklyn, 1993. It just drove home how incredibly hard it is to truly listen,
Yeah.
even with a whole team there. He said it was like schizophrenia, everyone talking at once in the command center.
Listening to themselves, not the actual situation.
Right. Listening to the voices in their own heads. We just naturally do that. Selective listening, confirmation bias. Hearing what we expect or want to hear.
It's a real challenge. So Voss's advice is...
Slow it down.
Right.
That's one of the big mantras. Rushing kills rapport, kills trust.
Right.
He learned, you know, if someone is talking, They're not shooting. Patience is calming. Time is a tool.
Okay, slow down. And then the voice itself.
Oh yeah, the voice is huge, often totally overlooked.
Yeah.
Voss breaks it down into three main tones. First, the late-night FM DJ voice. Deep, soft, slow, really reassuring, downward inflection. It says, I'm calm, I'm in control.
Like the voice you use to calm a scared kid, maybe.
Sort of, yeah. He used it to calm the bank robber, Chris Watts. In that Brooklyn case,
Yeah.
It worked. Second tone, the positive, playful voice, more upbeat, good for building rapport, encouraging people to think creatively, work together. And third, the direct assertive voice. This is the one you mostly want to avoid
Why is that?
because it just signals dominance. It makes people push back immediately, doesn't invite collaboration. Getting the voice right can just flip an emotional switch.
Okay, late night FM DJ voice. I'll have to practice that one. So you set the tone, you slow down. What about this mirroring thing?
Mirroring. Voss calls it a Jedi mind trick, but it's really based on natural human behavior, isopraxism. Super simple. Just repeat the last 1 to 3 keywords the other person said.
Just repeat them.
Yeah. Like if they say, this project deadline is really stressing me out, you just say, calmly, stressing you out.
Okay.
It sounds simple, maybe even a bit weird, but does a few things. It shows you're listening, signals similarity, which builds rapport unconsciously. And crucially, it encourages them to keep talking, to elaborate, without you even asking a direct question like, why? Or tell me more.
So they kind of explain it more to themselves.
Exactly. They hear their own words back and often expand on their thought. They end up negotiating with themselves, in a way. There was even a study with waiters. The ones who mirrored customer orders just by repeating them back got 70% higher tips.
70%. Okay, wow. That's not just rapport, that's results.
It's subtle, but it connects. Makes people feel heard.
All right, so mirroring opens the door. But you mentioned tactical empathy earlier. That sounds like the next level.
It is. Empathy, in Voss's world, isn't about agreeing with someone or even liking them. It's about understanding their perspective, their feelings, their world. He talks about a 6-hour standoff in Harlem. He and his team used that late-night FM DJ voice, and they just kept reflecting the fugitive's fears back to them.
What kinds of fears?
Like, it sounds like you're afraid of going back to jail. It seems like you don't want to get hurt. Just understanding their position. Eventually, they gave up peacefully. It's like Sun Tzu, right? The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Understand them first.
So empathy is understanding, not necessarily agreement. And the tool for showing that understanding is labeling.
Precisely. Labeling is putting a name on their emotion or their situation. It seems like, it sounds like, it looks like you feel X.
So in Harlem saying, it looks like you don't want to go back to jail, that's a label.
Exactly. It validates their feeling, builds connection, and there's neuroscience behind it too. UCLA studies show that when you label an emotion, you actually shift brain activity away from the amygdala, the fear center.
The fight or flight part.
Right. Towards the prefrontal cortex, the more rational thinking areas. It literally calms the raw emotion down. And always follow a label with silence. Let it sink in. Let them respond.
Okay, label the emotion, then be quiet. Got it. And what about the accusation audit? That sounds preemptive.
It is. It's incredibly powerful, though maybe a bit scary to try at first. You basically list out all the negative thing the other person might be thinking or saying about you before they do.
You bring up the bad stuff yourself.
Yeah. You say, you probably think I'm being difficult, or you might feel like we haven't delivered on our promises, or you likely think I'm inexperienced. It takes the sting out, as Voss says. Like a defense attorney bringing up the weaknesses in their own case first. It disarms the other side.
Does it work?
He gives an example of Anna, one of his students, government contractor. She's going for $1 million deal. She started the meeting by listing all the reasons the client might not want to work with her company, potential grievances, past issues.
Wow, that takes guts.
It does. But it worked. It created what Voss calls a safe zone of empathy. She addressed their unspoken fears up front, built massive trust, and landed the deal.
That really makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we avoid the tough stuff, the potential negatives, when maybe just putting them out there is the quickest way to build trust and actually change the whole dynamic?
It's often the case.
Okay, so another counterintuitive idea, the power of no. We usually hate hearing no, right? We see it as failure.
We do. But Voss argues no is often where the real negotiation begins. It's not always rejection.
So what is it then?
It's often about control. Saying no makes people feel safe, autonomous. It can be lots of things. I'm not ready to agree yet. I don't understand. I need more info. You're making me uncomfortable. Voss himself got into negotiation because his mentor, Amy Bondrow, kept telling him no when he wanted to join her hostage negotiation team.
Really? How did that lead him there?
That no forced a different conversation. She eventually guided him towards volunteering at a suicide hotline to get experience. That no actually opened the door to his whole career.
Huh. So no isn't the end, it's a detour, maybe.
Or a clarification point.
Yeah.
And it helps avoid bad yeses. Voss talks about 3 kinds of yes. There's the counterfeit. Yes. They say yes just to make you go away, but they mean no.
We've all gotten those.
Totally.
Okay.
Then the confirmation yes, just a simple affirmation like, yes, I had breakfast, no commitment. And finally, the commitment yes. That's the real deal, the one that leads to action. That's what you want.
So getting to know first might actually help you avoid those fake yeses.
Exactly. It lets people feel secure enough to eventually give you a real yes.
Yeah.
Good negotiators aren't trying to trick people into saying yes. They're guiding the other person to see the solution as their idea, persuading in their world, understanding their motivations, not just pushing your own arguments, the Joe businessman trap.
Right. Avoid the ego trip. Makes sense. And what about getting ghosted? Like, someone just stops responding to emails?
Yes. Email magic. For that, Voss suggests using a no-oriented question, something that implies you might walk away.
Playing on that loss aversion thing again.
Exactly. Like sending a simple one-line email, have you given up on this project?
Ooh, that feels a bit bold.
It can. But he says it often gets an immediate response. Usually a, no, of course not. Sorry, I've been busy with XYZ. People hate feeling like they've dropped the ball or abandoned something. It often restarts the conversation.
Okay, so no isn't the enemy. And this leads to what you called the sweetest 2 words.
Yeah, that's right.
Not, you're right, but that's right.
Big difference. That's right, is the magic phrase. It means the other person feels completely heard and understood. Like, yes, you nailed it. That's exactly how I feel what the situation is. It's a breakthrough moment.
And you're right is bad.
Often, yes. You're right is usually a sign of superficial agreement. Someone just wants to end the conversation or appease you without actually changing their mind or behavior. Voss uses his son Brandon as an example. Playing football, the coach would give advice and Brandon would just say, you're right, you're right. But nothing changed on the field.
Because he didn't truly get it or agree internally.
Right. The change happened when Voss used tactical empathy, labeled the feeling. It seems like you think dodging a block is unmanly. And Brandon paused and said, that's right.
Ah, and that unlocked the change.
That was the turning point, because he felt understood.
So how do you get someone to say that's right?
Through a really good summary. You combine paraphrasing, saying things back in your own words with labeling their emotions. You summarize their situation, their feelings, their perspective so accurately that their only possible response is, that's right.
Like putting their whole world into words for them.
Yes, exactly. He talks about the Jeffrey Schilling kidnapping in the Philippines. Negotiations were stalled for months. Huge $10 million demand from the rebel leader Sabaya. Voss coached the Filipino negotiator Benji to just summarize all of Sabaya's complaints about historical injustices, war damages, oppression. A long summary.
And Sabaya's reaction?
Silence. For almost a full minute, then finally, that's right, and right after that, the $10 million demand just vanished.
Wow, just gone. Because he finally felt heard.
That's the power. That moment of, that's right, it's when genuine connection happens and real change, lasting change, becomes possible.
Okay, so we've got these core tools, but Voss also talks about shaping the broader context, right? Like bending reality and finding black swans. Let's start with fairness and deadlines.
Yeah, the idea of never split the difference, the title of the book, that classic compromise, like the story of the husband wanting black shoes, wife wanting brown, so he wears one of each.
Which makes nobody happy.
Right. It often leads to a lousy outcome for everyone. Voss pushes for finding creative solutions that meet underlying needs, not just splitting things down the middle.
And deadlines. We all feel pressure from deadlines.
We do, and often they're totally artificial, or at least flexible. Deadlines make us rush, make us impulsive, make us accept bad deals just to get it done. Voss's mantra is key here. No deal is better than a bad deal. You need to resist that internal pressure.
And maybe use the other side's deadline pressure.
Absolutely. Recognize when they might be under pressure. He mentions Haitian kidnappers getting way more antsy as the weekend approached. That gave his team leverage because they saw the pattern, the deadline pressure on the other side.
Smart. Okay, what about the word fair? People use that all the time. We just want what's fair.
Oh, the F word, as Voss calls it. It's super emotional, often manipulative. When someone says that, it instantly puts you on the defensive, implies you've been unfair.
Yeah, it does. So how do you respond?
His counter is brilliant, again, counterintuitive. You pause and say calmly, okay, I apologize. Let's stop everything. Let's go back to where I started treating you unfairly, and we'll fix it.
Whoa, that completely flips the script.
It does. It disarms them. They usually back down from the accusation and get back to the actual issues because you've called out the manipulation in a non-confrontational way.
Okay, bending reality, prospect theory, loss aversion. How does that play out in practice?
Well, knowing that value is subjective is huge. People value things they possess, more that coffee mug example. They'll fight harder to avoid a loss than to achieve an equal gain.
So how do you use that?
In monetary talks, often let them anchor first, state their price. When you make an offer, especially salary, use a range. Like, companies at this level pay between $130,000 and $170,000. Anchor's high, but feels reasonable.
And pivot to non-money stuff?
Yes. Find things that are valuable to you, but maybe cheap for them, or vice versa. Like Voss taking a magazine cover story instead of his full speaking fee. The publicity was worth more to him than the cash difference, and cost the Bar Association almost nothing extra. Find that asymmetry.
And for price negotiation, there's the Ackerman model. Sounds technical.
It's a structured process, yeah. Basically, you set your target price, then you make a first offer at 65% of that, then raise to 85%, then 95%, then your final offer is 100%.
Why the specific percentages?
The key is the decreasing increments between offers. And your final offer should be a non-round number, like $17,850 instead of $18,000. It creates a psychological effect where the other side feels like they've really squeezed every last penny out of you. They feel like they won, even that you landed exactly on your target price.
That's clever, making them feel like they extracted the maximum concession.
Right. It satisfies their need to feel like they fought hard and got a good deal.
Okay, let's go back to those calibrated questions. Creating the illusion of control.
Yeah, this came partly from a painful lesson for Voss, the Dos Palmas kidnapping, which he called a train wreck. It taught him negotiation isn't about beating someone, it's about collaboration, even with an adversary. The goal is to subtly guide them so they propose your solution. Give them the feeling of being in charge.
The illusion of control,
Yeah.
and how and what questions are the tools.
Exactly. Questions starting with how or what.
Yeah.
They're inherently open-ended. They don't give the other side a target to attack, like a why question often does.
Why did you do that? Sounds accusatory.
Totally. But what are you hoping to achieve by doing that? Or how can we work together to solve this? That invites thought, not defense. These questions also gently educate your counterpart about the problems your solution solves, without you having to spell it out.
Like in that Ecuador kidnapping, asking, how do we know Jose is okay? Over and over.
It kept the kidnappers talking, thinking about Voss's team's problem, proof of life, bought crucial time, and Jose eventually escaped. It forced them to engage with the obstacles to their own demands.
And the ultimate calibrated question seems to be, how am I supposed to do that?
Oh, that's a golden one. It's a fantastic way to say no without actually saying no. It pushes the problem-solving back onto them. Your demand is unreasonable. How can I possibly meet it?
It forces them to think about your constraints.
Exactly. And maybe offer a different, more workable solution.
Okay, finally, the really mysterious part. Finding black swans. These unknown unknowns.
Yeah, the term comes from Nassim Taleb, but Voss applies it to negotiation. It started with a shocker. The 1981 William Griffin bank standoff. Griffin killed a hostage on deadline. This was completely unprecedented. Hostage takers just didn't do that. They wanted leverage money escape.
But Griffin wasn't typical.
Not at all. Turns out he wanted to die. He wanted suicide by cop. That was his motivation. It was completely outside the FBI's frame of reference, a total black swan. It changed everything they thought they knew.
So black swans aren't just rare things. They're things you didn't even conceive of.
Exactly. Pieces of information, motivations, circumstances that you literally never imagined. But if you uncover them, they completely reshape the entire negotiation landscape. They're the unknown unknowns. Like maybe the person you're negotiating with secretly wants the deal to fail because they're leaving the company.
Or that Coca-Cola guy who went silent.
Right. He wasn't ignoring Voss's student out of disinterest. His whole division was in chaos. He'd lost power, and he was too embarrassed to admit it. That hidden info was the black swan.
So how on earth do you find these things?
It takes real mental flexibility, deep listening, not just for words, but for what's not being said, for inconsistencies. When something just feels off or doesn't make sense.
That's a clue.
Often, yeah. That's where you need to dig deeper with open-ended questions, labeling, summarizing. Don't dismiss seemingly irrational behavior. Explore it.
And leverage isn't fixed, right? It depends on these hidden factors.
Totally. Leverage shifts. It's about who feels they have more to lose in that moment. You gain leverage not just through power, but by understanding the other person's worldview, their hopes, their fears, what Voss calls their religion.
Their core beliefs or drivers.
Yeah, like with Kent Watson, a devout Christian hostage taker. The FBI picked up on subtle religious references he made. They eventually used the concept of the dawn of the third day resurrection, new beginnings to appeal to his faith and convince him to surrender peacefully. They used his religion to connect and influence.
Wow, that's deep. So tying this all together, it's quite a journey. From Harvard to the power of no, getting that crucial, that's right, hunting for black swan.
It really is. And the core message seems to be moving away from seeing negotiation as conflict toward seeing it as collaborative problem solving. The adversary isn't usually the person, it's the situation.
And these aren't tricks, are they?
No, Voss is clear on that. He calls them emotional best practices, ways to fix the pervasive ineptitude, as he puts it, in our most important conversations. It's about building real connection, genuine understanding, and through that, achieving much better outcomes for everyone involved. He says every negotiation, every conversation is a series of small conflicts that, managed well, can rise to creative beauty.
Creative beauty, I like that.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. What perceived irrationality or crazy behavior have you dismissed recently in someone else? What if, instead of dismissing it, you explored it with some tactical empathy, some calibrated questions? Could that unlock a black swan opportunity for you?
Something to definitely think about. That's it for this deep dive. Go out there and connect, influence, and maybe discover some black swans.
Factoring can meet the cash needs of manufacturers impacted by rising tariffs. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit.
Welcome to The Debate, where we delve into substantive issues arising from source material, illuminating different perspectives through thoughtful disagreement. Today, we're really dissecting the core philosophy of effective negotiation, drawing on some, well, fascinating expert insights from the field. And the central question before us today is this: is negotiation fundamentally a rational problem-solving process, best approached with logic and objective frameworks? Or is it primarily an emotional and psychological endeavor where things like tactical empathy and understanding human irrationality actually yield superior results? Now, I'll be contending that successful negotiation is built upon a deep understanding and, frankly, strategic engagement with human emotion and irrationality. I see these as the real levers of influence.
And I'll be taking the position that while emotions, yes, they undeniably play a significant role, and they certainly need to be accounted for, the most effective and, I'd argue, sustainable negotiations are ultimately guided by rational problem-solving, objective analysis, and, well, solid frameworks.
Okay, so let me lay out my view. Negotiation, really, at its heart, it's an emotional game. It's not primarily a logical one. Decades of experience, particularly in these, incredibly high stakes, sometimes life or death situations our expert talks about, they consistently reveal that human beings are, and I'm quoting the source material here, crazy, irrational, impulsive, emotionally driven animals. Now, that isn't meant as a critique. It's more of a fundamental truth, meaning that pure logic, well, it's often going to fall flat. The material illustrates this so powerfully through Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's work on behavioral economics, showing us that feeling is actually a form of thinking. Cognitive biases like loss aversion, our psychological tendency to feel the pain of a loss about twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. These biases significantly distort our perceptions.
They make objective rationality, frankly, a pretty rare beast. Traditional, purely rational approaches like the classic Harvard getting to yes methodology, they demonstrably failed in critical FBI hostage scenarios. Why? Precisely because they couldn't account for these deeply irrational motivations of individuals who, for example, actually think he's the Messiah. Our experts' approach, which centers on tactical empathy, active listening, calibrated questions, and really understanding the game beneath the game. That means the hidden emotional and psychological dynamics driving behavior. This has proven universally effective. It acknowledges that inherent human need we all have to feel understood and, crucially, in control. It turns those emotional currents into real leverage. The genuine breakthrough moments, whether it's an ex-boss agreeing to a transfer you need or a kidnapper suddenly dropping at $10 million demand, they come not from logic alone, but from emotionally intelligent influence.
Right. I understand the emphasis on emotion, and I absolutely agree that acknowledging the powerful influence of emotion and human irrationality is crucial. Can't ignore it. However, I approach this from a slightly different angle. For me, the fundamental structure and the enduring goals of negotiation remain rooted in a rational desire for, well, optimal outcomes. Look at the Harvard approach. As the source material itself notes, it provides a brilliant, rational, and profound synthesis of the most advanced game theory and legal thinking of the day. And it originated concepts we now see as absolutely necessary, like entering negotiations with a BATNA. That's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Essentially, it's your vital plan B if the current negotiation collapses, giving you immense leverage and clarity. Now, it's incredibly telling, I think, that the expert himself, after years of intense field experience, recognized the need to, quote, articulate my knowledge and learn how to combine it with theirs, Harvard's, and they clearly had some, so I could understand, systematize, and expand it. This highlights a critical point for me. Even the most intuitive, gut-level, on-the-ground expertise benefits immensely from a structured, rational framework to be truly understood, systematized, and applied more broadly. Emotions are powerful variables. Yes, absolutely, they need to be understood, categorized, managed, but they are not the sole drivers of the entire process, nor should they dictate the overarching strategy. The objective, at the end of the day, is still to reach a commitment, yes, one that leads to action, maybe a signed contract, and rational frameworks provide the roadmap for navigating the complexities to actually achieve that desired end. Without a clear, rational objective, emotional engagement, however empathetic, can easily become aimless or maybe even counterproductive.
I appreciate that perspective on structure, but I think I frame the very nature of human decision-making quite differently. The source material, it unequivocally supports the idea that people are neither fully rational nor completely selfish, and they frequently suffer from all sorts of cognitive biases, like the framing effect, where just the way information is presented can profoundly sway decisions, and prospect theory, which explains how people evaluate potential gains and losses, often leading to, irrational risk-taking, even when it's not in their best interest. Now, this isn't about minor quirks. This is about the fundamental, often unconscious way we process information. Just consider that revealing incident described where the Harvard professors themselves, the proponents of pure rationality, they fumbled quite dramatically in a role play. Why? They were confronted with calibrated questions. Questions like, how am I supposed to do that?
These questions shifted the entire frame of the conversation away from a direct threat towards logistical issues. It showed their purely intellectual, objective approach was simply insufficient for real emotional pressure. They got forced out of their logical comfort zone. And furthermore, think about that anecdote, the one about the student who accidentally got a better deal. They anchored a range of $130,000 and $170,000 instead of just stating $110,000. And this highlights how people unconsciously adjust their expectations based on these extreme anchors. It powerfully demonstrates the irrational impact of subtle psychological cues on seemingly rational monetary decisions. These examples for me illustrate that our decision-making is deeply and often unconsciously swayed by emotional and psychological factors first. Logic often just follows along to justify rather than actually leading the way.
Okay, I acknowledge the profound impact of those examples, and the reality of cognitive biases is, undeniable. However, I wonder if we're conflating the existence of biases with the negation of a rational core to negotiation. While behavioral economics, yes, correctly identifies our cognitive biases, acknowledging them and then, crucially, developing strategies to mitigate their negative impact, isn't that in itself a profoundly rational step? The core principles of getting to yes, specifically things like separate the person, the emotion from the problem, and focus on their interests, why they're asking for it. These seem precisely designed to manage these emotional factors by bringing underlying, often rational motivations to light. Even the concept of a black swan, an unpredictable, high-impact event that only in retrospect seems kind of obvious, even that is a rational framework for understanding and preparing for unpredictable events. The problem, as I see it, isn't that emotions exist, but it's when negotiators fail to apply a systematic, rational approach to identify, categorize, and strategically account for these emotions as part of an overall strategy. The expert describes uncovering unknown unknowns. That seems fundamentally a rational pursuit of information, even if the information itself turns out to be surprising or emotionally charged. It's about systematically integrating all the data, emotional data included, into a coherent, objective-driven strategy.
I see the appeal of integrating everything into a neat, rational strategy, but let me offer a different perspective on maybe the ultimate goal of the negotiation process itself. I believe the traditional, almost fetishization of getting to a quick yes is a fundamental flaw. Often a yes is just, well, a meaningless answer that hides deeper objections. Or worse, it's a counterfeit yes, used merely to politely dismiss you or just delay things. It offers no real insight. No, however, no is, as the material says, pure gold. Why? Because it grants the speaker feelings of safety and control, and it always alters the conversation by forcing a clarification of boundaries and real interests. Now, this isn't just a clever turn of phrase. It's a profound reorientation. By actually allowing someone to say no, you empower them, you foster trust, and you open the door to genuine agreement, rather than some forced or superficial yes. Think about Marty Evelsizer. Described in the material, she kept her job by inviting her supervisor to say no to her continued employment. That demonstrates how allowing autonomy through no creates a constructive environment, completely shifting the power dynamics. A genuine commitment yes, a truly actionable agreement, that's only possible when all the no's, all the underlying objections and fears have been explored and properly addressed. And that requires deep psychological understanding, not just, pushing for agreement for its own sake.
Okay, I agree that a premature or counterfeit yes can be incredibly problematic. And the strategic use of no as a tool to uncover deeper issues, that's a valuable insight, absolutely. But even with that, haven't you implicitly made a case for a rational purpose here? While an early, unexamined yes can indeed lead you astray, the ultimate objective of any negotiation is surely still a commitment yes. It's what the source material describes as a true agreement that leads to action, a yes at the table that ends with a signature on the contract. The no techniques you mentioned, like asking, how am I supposed to do that? Well, they're effective precisely because they steer the counterpart toward finding a rational solution to the problem, ideally one that benefits both sides. The goal is still to get to a positive, actionable outcome. Framing negative responses not as rejections, but as steps toward clarification, as you advocate, that sounds like a very rational strategy to achieve that end. The expert himself states, quote, yes is nothing without how, which to me implicitly acknowledges the critical importance of a logical plan for implementation. And that is an inherently rational exercise. So the question isn't whether no is useful, clearly it is, but whether its utility is primarily as a means to a rational end, or is it the end in itself?
I'm not convinced that framing it as simply a means to a rational end really captures the full power of this approach. I think that line of reasoning maybe overlooks the core mechanism of why tactical empathy works so powerfully in the first place. It functions because it directly addresses primal human needs, specifically the need to feel safe and secure, and the need to feel in control. This isn't about logic initially. It's about deep-seated psychological wiring. It's described as listening as a martial art, where you use what you hear not to directly counter, but to redirect and influence, much like, say, an Aikido master uses an opponent's own momentum against them. When you verbalize emotions, for instance, by saying something like, it seems like you don't want to go back to jail, which was used with those fugitives in Harlem, it actually disarms the raw intensity of the emotion. Neurologically, it shifts activity in their brain away from the primitive reactive parts towards the areas that govern rational thinking. It effectively makes them capable of rationality rather than just assuming it's already present and waiting for it to surface. This is precisely why those fugitives in Harlem emerged after 6 long hours of silence, or why Benji's simple acknowledgement, "That's right," in response to Sabia's rage completely transformed their negotiations. These aren't just clever tricks. These techniques are about genuinely getting inside the head and eventually under the skin of your counterpart. It's about making them feel truly understood, creating what psychologists call unconditional positive regard, which is a non-judgmental acceptance that builds profound trust. It's really an applied people smarts that leverages emotions to achieve concrete outcomes, rather than simply assuming rationality from the outset or just waiting for it to maybe appear later.
I find that approach profound in its understanding of human psychology, I really do. And tactical empathy is undoubtedly a valuable set of tools for managing that emotional landscape. However, I'd approach this from another angle again. Tools, no matter how sophisticated or powerful, ultimately serve a larger, often rational objective. Even the behavioral change stairway model the expert outlines, active listening, empathy, rapport, influence, leading finally to behavioral change, it clearly progresses towards influence and behavioral change. That inherently implies a desired, predefined, likely rational outcome you're aiming for. The use of calibrated questions, those open-ended questions designed to make your counterpart feel in control while subtly guiding them towards your preferred outcome, is explicitly described in the source as leading the patient to solve his own problem in the way the doctor wanted.
That indicates that this illusion of control is a means to a predetermined, rational end. The ultimate purpose of negotiation, surely, is to resolve conflict and reach an agreement, not merely to understand emotions for their own sake, however valuable that understanding is. Even the structured techniques like summarizing and paraphrasing, which are key parts of the tactical empathy toolbox, are themselves rational methods. They confirm understanding to build rapport, which then facilitates a logical path forward. So the success of these techniques, from my perspective, ultimately depends on guiding the negotiation towards a sensible resolution that aligns with desired goals, goals which are often rationally defined from the outset.
While I agree that a sensible resolution is indeed the aim, I'd emphasize that these techniques aren't just a means to some externally imposed rational end. I think they redefine the path to that end by fundamentally altering the other party's internal state, their emotional reality. The genius here, as I see it, is that by addressing the emotional dimension first, you actually unlock the capacity for a shared rationality that might not have even been accessible otherwise. So it's not just about managing emotions alongside logic, it's about using emotion to construct a new shared reality where a positive logical outcome becomes genuinely possible.
And I would still maintain that the influence generated by those techniques is most effective and most ethically applied when it's directed towards a clear, logical, and ultimately mutually beneficial objective. The emotional understanding illuminates the path, yes, absolutely essential, but the rational framework, for me, still provides the map and defines the destination.
Well, today we've certainly explored a fascinating and, often contentious question. Is negotiation fundamentally a rational problem-solving endeavor, or is it really an emotional, psychological one at its core? I've argued, I hope powerfully, for the primacy of understanding and strategically engaging with human irrationality and emotion, citing the effectiveness of things like tactical empathy and maybe no-oriented questioning in navigating those really tricky, real-world, high-stakes scenarios. It's about meeting people where they are, emotionally, to unlock genuine connection and ultimately influence.
And I, while acknowledging the undeniable and potent role of emotion and bias, have underscored what I see as the enduring value of rational frameworks, objective analysis, and structured approaches like those originating from Harvard. These provide, in my view, a critical foundation for managing those emotional variables, ensuring clarity of purpose, and ultimately achieving concrete, actionable agreements that, crucially, stand the test of time. For me, the emotions are variables, however powerful, to be expertly managed within a larger, coherent, rational strategy.
It's definitely clear that both perspectives offer some profound insights into the complex art, maybe science, of negotiation. Perhaps the deepest understanding emerges when these seemingly opposing philosophies aren't viewed as mutually exclusive, but more like complementary forces. The source material really seems to suggest that to truly master negotiation, one must be prepared to navigate both the logical landscape and those subterranean emotional currents with, ideally, equal skill and awareness. The real challenge, and perhaps the opportunity, lies in skillfully weaving together these two powerful dimensions.
Absolutely. I think the conversation certainly illuminates that intricate interplay between logic and emotion that's present in any successful negotiation outcome. It urges all of us, I think, to consider how we apply both our intellect and our understanding of human nature.
Factoring can meet the cash needs of manufacturers impacted by rising tariffs. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit.
Welcome to The Critique, where we help you sharpen your work.
Today, we're looking at excerpts from Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference.
Right, the negotiation book using FBI psychology. A fascinating read.
Absolutely. And right off the bat, you have to say the strengths are pretty clear.
Oh, definitely. The narrative, incredibly engaging.
Yeah, it just pulls you straight into those high-stakes scenarios, the Harvard role play, the hostage stuff.
It gives it that immediate credibility, doesn't it? And urgency.
It really does. And the core idea that negotiation is driven by emotion, by psychology, not just pure logic, that comes through so clearly.
He makes complex ideas feel, accessible, memorable, even.
And the techniques themselves, mirroring, labeling, those calibrated questions, they're laid out really practically.
Sets a high bar for negotiation advice, for sure. Very solid foundation.
Totally agree. But, thinking about how someone actually uses this stuff in the real world.
Well, maybe the reader's grasp of real negotiation could be boosted by showing how multiple techniques work together a bit earlier on.
Ah, okay. So you mean modeling that simultaneous application right from the start?
Exactly. Because the book does a great job introducing mirroring here, labeling there, chapter by chapter.
Right, sequentially.
Yeah, but real talks aren't usually like that, are they? You're not just using one tool at a time.
No, it's much more fluid. Like that band playing together analogy he uses later?
Precisely. But that feeling, that synergy, it feels a bit understated in the initial chapters. It mostly focuses on one technique per example early on. So the weakness is that this sequential teaching might imply a kind of linear process.
Which isn't quite how it plays out. It might leave the reader feeling a little less ready for the rapid-fire reality of a negotiation.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the suggestion there?
Well, lean into that band playing together idea sooner. Introduce some scenarios earlier that explicitly show several techniques working in quick succession, interacting within one conversation.
Instead of just demonstrating one technique in isolation for each example?
Yeah. Give them a taste of the interplay early. Set that expectation.
Okay, I like that. So concrete examples.
Well, take mirroring in Chapter 2 or labeling in Chapter 3. When introducing them, you could have an example where the late-night FMJ voice is also clearly being used.
Ah, so describe the tone, the pacing, alongside the mirroring, not just the words being repeated.
Exactly. Show how the delivery enhances the technique. It's not just what you say.
It's how you say it. Good point.
Or think about that bank robbery story in Chapter 2 with Chris Watts. Great narrative.
Yeah, really vivid.
So after bringing in the DJ voice and mirroring, the description could immediately show how that maybe led into some subtle labeling.
Like the negotiator mirrors something Watts says, then immediately calmly labels an emotion. Sounds like you're feeling trapped?
Yes, and maybe show how getting that information through mirroring was then used for labeling, either out loud or just internally, to identify the underlying fear. Makes it feel more connected, more holistic right away.
I see. And you mentioned the Ryan B. flight negotiation later on?
Yeah, Chapter 3. Brilliant example of using labels, mirrors, empathy all together to get a seat on a full flight.
So your suggestion is maybe put that kind of multi-tactic example or reference something similar much earlier?
Could be. Maybe even Chapter 1, just to give readers that foundational picture of how all the instruments start warming up together in practice.
Right, a more complete view of the toolkit in action from the get-go. Okay, that's a strong point.
Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the language, the framing.
Okay.
It's definitely powerful language, very evocative, drawn from those high-stakes situations.
Yeah, things like disarm, redirect, and dismantle your counterpart. Or subdue the enemy without fighting. Memorable stuff.
But
Well, the potential issue, as I see it, is that while the book does clarify it's about being relationship affirming, understanding, mutual solutions.
right. But some of that initial phrasing, especially for someone looking to negotiate like a raise, not a hostage release, it might accidentally sound a bit like tactical manipulation.
Like a zero-sum game, win-lose?
Potentially, yeah. It risks slightly overshadowing that deeper message of collaboration and empathy, especially early on.
And that could maybe put off some readers who are really focused on explicit win-win outcomes, even though the techniques are meant for that?
Exactly. It's a subtle thing, but it could affect how universally the message lands initially.
Okay, so the weakness is that some of the powerful, high-stakes language might inadvertently create a perception of manipulation for everyday users.
Right. So the suggestion isn't to ditch the FBI perspective. That's its strength, its hook.
No, definitely keep that.
But maybe occasionally rephrase or just immediately contextualize some of those battle metaphors. Frame them explicitly around creating understanding, trust, finding shared solutions, even when you're facing resistance.
So maintain the authority, but broaden the immediate appeal.
Yeah. For example, that intro bit, page 18. Disarm, redirect, and dismantle. And to do so in a relationship-affirming way.
Uh-huh.
What if the relationship-affirming part was brought forward, emphasized more? Or maybe frame disarm right away as, say, neutralize resistance or de-escalate tension.
Just to immediately clarify the non-adversarial intent? Okay.
Or take the Sun Tzu quote, page 54. Subdue the enemy without fighting. Powerful, yes.
Very.
But what if right after it you added something like, by truly understanding their perspective to find common ground, or by transforming adversarial positions into shared solutions through empathy?
Ah, so it instantly reframes subduing as achieving understanding, not just overpowering.
Exactly. It connects the quote more directly to the book's core empathetic philosophy.
That makes sense. And you could build on that Hillary Clinton empathy anecdote too, right? The criticism she faced?
Definitely. The book uses that well, but it can maybe go a step further and proactively link the psychological edge it talks about.
Link it more explicitly to things like removing emotional barriers to rational dialogue?
Yes, or fostering a receptive mindset from mutual benefit. Make it crystal clear the edge isn't just about winning, but about enabling a better conversation, a better outcome for both sides.
Highlighting the win-win potential more directly in the language itself. Got it. Okay, third point.
Right. So the book starts strong with those amazing FBI stories. They really establish credibility.
Totally. Hooks you right in.
But then there's maybe an opportunity to strengthen the link between those high-stakes narratives and the reader's everyday life, more continuously.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
Well, it does explicitly say life is negotiation, mentions using the skills for a car price, a raise, bedtime.
Page 17, yeah.
But then, when explaining the individual techniques, the detailed examples often swing back to those really complex high-stakes scenarios. Bank robbers, terrorists.
And that creates a bit of a jump for the reader. Like, okay, but how does this bank robber thing help me with my manager?
Maybe without enough frequent, little bridges provided along the way.
So the weakness is the potential cognitive leap, needing more consistent, smaller connections to daily life.
Exactly. Without those frequent microbridges, it might be harder for someone to instantly see how to apply, say, mirroring when their kid is upset, right after reading about it in a hostage context.
Okay, so the suggestion is pretty straightforward then.
Yeah, just weave in very brief, relatable, everyday microexamples alongside the big, detailed, high-stakes stories, as each technique is explained.
To constantly reinforce that universal applicability. Lower the mental barrier.
Precisely. Make it feel immediately usable in their world.
Makes perfect sense. Give me an example.
Okay, the late-night FM DJ voice. Chapter 2, after the Chris Watts bank robber example.
The calm downward inflection.
Right. Just add a quick sentence like, you can use this same calm tone when your teenager's upset about a curfew, helping them feel heard. Boom. Instantly relatable.
Nice. Grounds it immediately.
Or mirroring, after the bank robber and the waiter study examples in Chapter 2.
Yeah?
Add something quick like, it works just as well when your partner says, work was so draining today. You simply echo, draining today? It invites them to share more.
Shows the principle works from the extreme to the everyday. I like that. Simple, effective.
Even with a concept like black swans, the unknown unknowns in Chapter 10, usually explained by that big bank crisis.
William Griffin, yeah.
Before diving deep into that, maybe frame it with something common. Even when you're setting a project deadline, a black swan might beat a colleague's unmentioned personal issue. Finding that unknown unknown is key to a solution that works for everyone.
Connects the abstract idea to a relatable work scenario first. Smart.
And one last thought on this. The negotiation one sheet in the appendix. Great tool.
Yeah, very practical for prep.
Maybe reference it earlier, Chapter 2 or 3, perhaps? Frame it as the mental model for approaching any negotiation, big or small, as that psychological investigation.
Integrate the prep tool into the learning journey sooner, like giving them the map earlier.
Exactly. Makes the whole process feel more cohesive, bridging theory and practice right from the start.
Okay, so wrapping up then, we've looked at a few ways to potentially enhance this already strong material.
Yeah, 3 main areas. First, showing that integration of techniques more explicitly earlier on, the whole band playing together.
Right.
Second, subtly refining some of the language to really emphasize the collaborative influence aspect, ensuring it resonates broadly.
Making sure that win-win feeling comes through alongside the high-stakes authority.
And third, weaving in more of those everyday microexamples to constantly bridge the gap between the FBI stories and the reader's daily life.
Factoring can meet the cash needs of manufacturers impacted by rising tariffs. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit.